is that time. What time?
Now it's time for Greg Bishop and the Council Roundup.
A review of Springfield City Council happenings brought to you by Head West Subs. When you want a great sub, you've got to Head West. Their downtown location open for lunch. Head West Subs. Don't forget about delivery. Of course, we review all things that happen at the Springfield City Council, regardless if it's a full council meeting like it was last week, 4.5 hours or so. Last night, though, was a committee of the whole where they determine which ordinances are going to go where, either on the debate agenda where they debate it further before final passage, or they put it on the consent agenda, which is considered really non-controversial, and they lump a bunch of them together and pass them all at once. But with a 10-ward setup and the mayor in the middle, you've got plenty of different personalities that can really air their concerns, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to see kind of how city councils work, and in particular, Springfield being the capital city of Illinois, how Springfield City Council works. So let's go ahead and get right on into it. Fun little opening here before they even got the meeting started. And if you pull up the video, you can actually see here that a couple of the alder people wearing very similar clothes. And here's a little bit of that.
Plaid brothers over there.
I knew. I looked over at him.
You were just waiting.
But he ain't got the belt buckle.
Thank goodness.
And I swear.
He's got better taste.
Nice belt buckle.
That's the John Dutton version.
The Plaid brothers. Yeah, so you can kind of see.
Ooh, he got you. You don't want to look good. They're the plaid.
Yes.
Plaid brothers.
The Plaid brothers.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. Well, I guess I do because it's kind of funny. It's kind of Alderman Redpath and Alderman Gregory wearing very similar shirts. Apparently, Alderman Redpath had a belt buckle on. Alderman Gregory did not, but Alderwoman DeCenso pointing out the Plaid brothers. So that's a fun way to start last night's council meeting for the council roundup. But let's go ahead and get into it. It's again the committee of the whole where they deal with all kinds of ordinances. Here is the chair, Alderman Roy Williams, conducting business.
An ordinance authorizing additional funding
With
in an
Clerk
amount of $40,000 under contract number UE 20-11-65, 5-year term for general use maintenance gases with Ilmo Products Company for a total amount not to exceed $81,411.95 for the Office of Public Utilities.
Consent.
But you've got Alderman Redpath. He's got some questions about this.
Is there a benefit to the 5-year contract? I don't like to do multi-year contracts.
Yeah, I think they thought they'd get a better price over a 5-year period is why that originally was set up that way. I can't talk specifics on the contract because I wasn't involved, but
Just have Doug give me some information on this if you would, and that'll be fine.
Sure.
Thank
Yep.
you.
It was competitively bid though, so it was. Yep.
It's okay.
Yep.
So we'll probably hear more about that. Maybe not. Maybe they'll just go ahead and pass it once alder people get the information they need. More from last night's city council meeting as they move on to the next ordinance.
The purchase of new relays for various substations with Schweitzer's Engineering Laboratories Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $162,653.64 for the Office of Public Utilities.
Consent.
So in a way, that's just to kind of show you how much money they spend. Next ordinance.
2023-054, an ordinance approving the appointment of Teresa C. Jones to the Springfield Community Relations Commission.
For debate.
And Teresa was there to address the council and share some of her thoughts.
We don't and we won't agree on everything, but that's okay. It's what we show, and it's what it is about our community sees. It's about representation. It's about relations and relationships. It's about community relations. So I want to be in a position to help with this.
And Alderwoman Connolly thanking her constituent for being there and being willing to take part in city government in this fashion.
Very proud to have her as one of my residents in Ward 8, but I've also known Teresa for years, and you'll make an excellent addition to this commission. So thank you for accepting this volunteer position. Appreciate it very much.
So obviously, moving forward here, you've got the alder people hearing more ordinances up for consideration. Next up is one that has got some issues that they're going to unpack a bit.
Very proud to have her as one of my
Alderwoman
residents in
Conley.
Ward
We
8,
heard
but
that
I've also
already.
known.
All right, next.
This is as amended relating to the electrical and water liens.
Move for debate.
Second.
So, does this deal with that executive session that we heard so much about? We heard a little bit of that executive session tape from the November 2021 closed-door meeting, where they talked about liens against the Wyndham City Center, which was back, had a whole bunch of backlogged bills with the utility that they had. And then the mayor, apparently after talking with aldermen behind closed doors, feeling he had a consensus to move forward and waive some of the fees, $250,000 worth of fees related to that building. But some of the dust up from that is people not wanting the mayor to make such unilateral discussions and decisions. So this ordinance, is that a way to work on that? Here's the Corporation Counsel, Jim Zirkle.
This is as amended relating to the electrical and water liens.
Move for debate.
Second.
This is really trying to set up a formal procedure for dealing with compromising any liens. There's been a lot of discussion about how that should happen. State law allows municipalities to put liens for water and sewer. Springfield has taken that a step farther and does not only water, sewer, but electric. And so there's a section of the city code that addresses putting liens, liens on property for both water and electric. And this is just adding clarity on what the process should be if there's a compromise needed related to any of those liens.
So again, Corporation Counsel Jim Zirkle just kind of giving some of the legalese there. He continues on.
Or gives authority to the general manager
McMiniman
and the city attorney acting collectively to approve settlements up to $20,000, and then the mayor would have approval authority, a settlement authority up to $50,000, and then the city council would have to weigh in at $50,000 and above.
So it's kind of staggered, right? The utility can forgive $20,000 dealing with liens, and the mayor can then bump that up to $50,000 without having to get city council approval. And then after that, if it's $50,000 plus one, then the city council has to deal with it. But McMiniman also pointing out a typo.
If you look down at the bottom, it says $50
is
the approval authority for the council. I think we meant $50,000 and above for
zeros.
For city council approval.
I would not want to be listening to the meetings if they had to sit there and approve every single issue that dealt with $50 or more. That would turn into marathon 24-hour sessions of the city council, and I don't think anybody has time for that. All right, moving on, but more discussion about this. Again, here's Alderman Joe McMiniman.
Provision of this requires our utility to file a notice of lien whenever the amount owed gets to $20,000 and above and is 3 months delinquent. So that makes it a requirement. They can file liens at lesser amounts if it's commercially good practice to do so, or if there's reason to do so. And then the other provision of this is that any settled debt, regardless of amount, has to be filed with our city clerk, so it becomes a public record visible to anyone and everyone.
So interesting to hear the arguments here.
Would there be a collection attempt before we go to establishing a lien on a piece of property?
That would be at the discretion of the utility up to $20,000. We don't have to file a notice of lien up to $20,000.
And
but they'd have the discretion to do so.
Here's Corporation Counsel Zirkle.
This actually goes beyond a normal contract enforcement action like you owe me money, so I'm going to take you to court. This actually acts as a lien on the real estate, and it gives a very powerful tool that private utilities don't have. The state law allows specifically for cities to have water and sewer, but this Springfield, because we have the utility, the electric utility, actually has expanded that to incorporate electric.
And Alderwoman Conley chiming in on this issue as well as to city authority and the language. The language is very important, as you heard the typo there about any approval over $50. They need to make sure that's $50,000. The language in particular about shall Alderwoman Conley has some concerns there.
Shall be approved by the mayor, and then in excess of 50,000 shall be approved by city council. I think I'd be more comfortable if, in both of those instances, the language was, must be submitted to for review and approval.
Subject to the approval is what we'll change it to.
Yeah,
Subject
something
to the
that shows that there's review and approval instead of this way. It's kind of, I feel like it ties our hands and everyone has to approve it. So
yeah, making sure that the language doesn't mean that they just rubber stamp things. So I imagine we may hear more about that in the future meeting where they move for final approval on this and other issues. A lot more coming up with the Council Roundup, brought to you by Head West Subs. When you want a great sub, you've got to Head West. Their downtown location open for lunch. Don't forget about delivery. Head West Subs. Got to turn my microphone on. It is the Council Roundup, brought to you by Head West Subs. When you want a great sub, you've got to Head West. Plowing through ordinances from last night's Committee of the Whole, and we heard a little bit about some CWLP stuff. We heard a little bit about the authority the City Council can have when dealing with liens against property owners for past due utilities, but also ordinances dealing with a whole bunch of other things. Here's a Corporation Council, actually the City Clerk, I believe. Yes, so next up, here's an ordinance up for consideration.
060, a resolution adopting the Heartland Continuum of Care 2022 through 2028 strategic plan to address the homelessness.
So this has been an ongoing conversation on how to exactly deal with the homeless population in Springfield, and Alderman Donilon has this measure. And he's got some people wanting to plug in as sponsors.
I would just, with permission of the sponsors, like to be added as a co-sponsor.
I was the original sponsor who asked for this, so I'd love to have you join.
Thank you. Well, I also asked for it as well.
Well, everybody's wanting to jump onto it.
Carrying over from a conversation from 2020 with the mayor,
right.
and when we originally denied, or my original vote for the Center for Health and Housing, I vowed that I would always continue to help homelessness. I would always go over there. I go over there. We do all types of things. So, I get it.
I reviewed the draft that Mr. Zirkle sent, so I appreciate your support. I think this is a great one for us to get.
So, moving forward with some kind of agreement for how to deal with the homeless population. Next up, we got an ordinance dealing with, a couple of different things here in the next segments. One about mayoral appointments and just how long those appointments can be in an acting position before the city council actually approves them. And then another one dealing with an ordinance that they already passed, and that gives $600,000 in tax increment finance funds to Horace Mann to tear down a building and put up a parking lot. So some possibility we're going to actually have to revisit that, not just coming up with the Council Roundup from last night's Committee of the Whole, but also for next week's full City Council meeting, where this is likely to be brought up, as one of the alder people who supported the measure last week is expected to make a motion to reconsider that next week. So we'll get to that conversation next. Here it is, the Council Roundup, brought to you by Head West Subs. When you want a great sub, you've got to Head West. Their downtown location open for lunch. Head West Sub. All right, back with the Council Roundup, brought to you by Head West Subs. When you want a great sub, you've got to Head West. Their downtown location open for lunch. Head West Subs. And last night's Springfield City Council Committee of the Whole, touching on all kinds of topics. Final couple things we're going to touch on for the Council Roundup. One deals with that Horace Mann ask that was approved last week to have the city give Horace Mann $600,000 in tax increment finance funds as part of an effort to take down a couple of dilapidated buildings and turn it into a parking lot. Well, after that vote that they said they based off of a map of historic outlines, it turns out they used an old map, and a new map actually includes these properties, so we'll hear some of that debate. But up next, let's talk about mayoral appointments. And we see this happen from time to time at the State House, where the governor appoints somebody, and then, when the time frame comes up for that person to be approved, the governor withdraws the appointment and remakes the appointment. We've seen that with the Prisoner Review Board at the State House. You've also got, the Department of Children and Family Services Director Mark Smith. He's up for a reappointment, and we'll see just how long it takes for them to do that. But that's at the State House. What about at City Hall? Well, an ordinance that is brought forward deals with this particular issue, and here's the clerk talking about what issue exactly they're dealing with.
This is Esmond pertaining to appointments.
Pertaining to appointments, but Alderman Sean Gregory touching on something.
Leave the city for whatever reason, whether it's resign, resignation, termination, etc. Do we add in cool-off periods to things that involve city contracts and city money? I think at times we have seen some things get complicated, with some issues like that, and I think that's something that we need to consider. I know there's other forms of government that have those contingencies in there. So
yeah, and in a way, he's kind of talking about a cool-off period or a revolving door prohibition of sorts. But that's not what this ordinance is dealing with. This ordinance is dealing with the issue of appointments and mayoral appointments. And Alderman Jim Donnellan providing a little bit more context.
There may be situations where
McMiniman,
an acting director,
gotta get it right,
who comes in might be intimidated by a 3-month rejection by the council. Maybe they want to get their boots on the ground for a longer period of time before the council can judge them to, take them off their position.
So essentially, this ordinance, it would say that the mayor can make appointments. As it is now, that person can be in an acting capacity for a year before alder people have to approve. Well, they want to shorten that duration to about 3 months or so. More from Alderman McMiniman.
Let's say we're 6 months out from an election, and a mayor is trying to recruit some directors. Would they want to be on safe ground for a longer period of time than 3 months? So
Alderman McMiniman does have just a few concerns. Alderman Donnellan, who brought forward this ordinance, sounding off about why he thinks it's necessary.
The effective date of this ordinance would not be until May 1, so it'd be after the election. It isn't about who's mayor now, or we don't know who's going to be mayor in the future. It could be Mayor Langfelder or Treasurer Busher.
And he continues on with some of his thoughts about why this is necessary.
A year is too long, I think, at least, and that's why I proposed a shorter time. I was cognizant of the fact and had discussions with Corporation Counsel about trying to be reasonable with because think about our process. We introduce an ordinance, it goes to committee the next week, then it goes to council the week after. A 60-day period or 30-day period is probably too short because we need time to vet those individuals and we get the resumes and have considerations. And this is a compromise number, and I'd like to go on debate. So thank you.
So we'll hear about this on debate and see where it ultimately goes. Alderwoman DeCenso chiming in about her concerns about the ordinance.
You live by the sword, you die by the sword. That's the risk you take in accepting a position such as a directorship. Is it fair? You know the risk going in.
She continues and sharing some of her experience being appointed to a position as a director of sorts, and then a new boss being elected and coming in and expecting to get fired, and that happened to her once.
Whether we extend it to 6 months or leave it at 90 days, I think something needs to change.
So that's on debate. I imagine we may hear more about that to next week's meeting, the full city council when they meet. All right, so now we get into a review of a vote that happened last week. Alderwoman Purchase raising issue with something that was brought up after last week's vote on the ordinance to give Horace Mann $600,000 in TIF money. Here's Alderwoman Purchase.
Papers here on our desk, and I wanted to allow Horace Mann to come up and speak to what we have in front of us, because today I was just made aware of something that would be coming forward from Alderwoman Conley, but I hadn't heard anything from her, so I do want to allow them to come up and address what's going on.
And what's going on is we got an indication of this here at WMAY with people reaching out saying that Horace Mann used an old map to show the outlines of historic districts when the properties they were talking about wanting to tear down for a parking lot were actually in part of the historic district. So the attorney for Horace Mann was there last night to apologize.
I want to start out by apologizing. Last week I stood up here and I stated that the buildings at 618 and 622 East Washington weren't in a historic district. And in making that statement, I relied on a map that was on the National Park Service's website. The National Park Service oversees the National Register of Historic Places. As I mentioned last week, we received a letter at about 11 a.m. and between 11 and 5:30. I thought the fastest way to figure out whether or not it was in a historic district was to go to the website maintained by the National Register of Historic Places. The map was incorrect. And as a result, what I said, that it was not in a historic district, was inaccurate. To be clear, both 618 and 622 East Washington are within a historic district, thanks to a boundary expansion that took place, that was approved by the National Park Service in 2017, I believe. The documentation supporting that expansion also identifies 618 East Washington Street as being a contributing structure to the historic district. 622 is not. So, again, on behalf of me, my law firm, my client, Horace Mann, I'm sorry.
He continues on, making the case to keep this in place.
But one thing has not changed in the intervening week. No prudent, feasible alternative exists. I mentioned last week that the last major rehabilitation of either one of these buildings took place in the late 1980s. Here's a fact I found out in the past week. The last time that utilities were on at one of these buildings was in 2006. Now, so for some perspective, the iPhone was first released in 2007.
That's pretty remarkable if you think about it. This building that they're wanting to tear down hasn't had utilities in it since before the iPhone came out. It's just mind-blowing.
Total buildings, the total project cost is about $4 million. We're asking for $600,000. That's about 15% of the project cost. It's a great deal. Option two is that the buildings continue to sit. The redevelopment of those sites fall apart. And after 10 to 20 years, because that's, roughly the boundary that we're in between right now, you've got continued vacancy, continued deterioration. The hole will get bigger. The mold will spread. The asbestos will still be there waiting for you.
Ah, it's no good. Again, the measure passed, and he's there making sure that it stays in place. I mean, his client, Horace Mann, wants that $600,000 from tax increment finance funds to help pay for this. But some concerns continue to be raised.
That the city didn't also do an independent review and catch that. I feel like that's why we have city offices and city staff. We should be reviewing things to make sure that an outside, an independent observer is reviewing submissions for something like a TIF proposal. I have some grave concerns about that topic.
And Alderwoman Conley, who voted for it last week.
If I had known that this is a contributing structure, especially 618, I would have been an easy no last week. You would have had your votes, and this would have gone on. Enough said. You make a compelling case with the state of the building. I understand that.
But she says that there's still some concerns.
You're going to put something great there. It's a parking lot.
If there was somebody there singing, just to provide a little bit of a melody there.
I mean, you're taking down a building to put in a parking lot.
All right. So they continue on with the ask. Alderwoman Conley, says that she plans on asking for a revote.
Is asked that as one of the prevailing votes on last week's consideration of this ordinance, and I'll get the right number in just a second, that we do reconsider this at next week's meeting.
So expect that. We'll hear more about this debate going on at the Springfield City Council meeting for when they have a motion to reconsider the vote to give Horace Mann $600,000. Will it change the ultimate outcome of this, or will they just lose support of Alderwoman Conley and still advance the measure? We'll see and watch that closely and bring it to you here with the Council Roundup each and every week on Wednesdays. They have a council meeting Tuesday. We bring you the Council Roundup on Wednesday. Brought to you by Head West Subs. When you want a great sub, you've got to head west. Their downtown location open for lunch. Head West Subs.